What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Crazy Face Uno podcast. Here with a good friend from college. His name is Calvin Walterhouse. Welcome, man.
Thank you.
How's it going?
You know, it could be better, but it could be a lot worse. So
Yeah.
we're doing pretty good.
So we are first full day of this little adventure this weekend.
Reunion
Of sorts, yeah. There's 6 of us, and we haven't seen each other all together in like a really long time.
About 10 years.
Yeah, crazy. What do you, how's the day and a half or half day or 24 hours been?
It's been really refreshing, and I think you kind of see what ideas become reality, both in your own life, because you got these people around that are reminding you of things you cared about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they cared about similar things, so it's interesting to see how everybody has taken those values and created realities with them.
Yeah. I 100%. I agree. It's been, it's funny because we probably all have friends like that, and I'm sure you have other friends as well, but it's been cool to start off and like just see each other for the first time in like 10 years, and also just to pick up where we left off, and just kind of go with the flow and like conversation
and even senses of humor.
Yeah.
Perhaps especially senses of humor.
Yeah.
These...
appreciation for those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would love to talk to you about just kind of like life from point A to point B, kind of like where you're at now. I know there's been a lot of things, and we can just kind of get into it and see where that goes. But you're from the South Bend area. You kind of grew up here with your parents. You've got an interesting like background from that, like as far as your family, and then into college and kind of the adventures that you've been on since college, and even in college in some ways. And would you mind kind of just taking us through, like, maybe it doesn't even have to be like I was born on this day, but you know, like from the beginning to kind of like where you are now, and like how you perceive that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we all met at Bethel, which is, you know, a small Christian liberal arts college here in Indiana, which for people who might not be familiar with Indiana, it's kind of like the Shire in Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit.
Good example.
You know, it's this cozy place where people don't like to go on adventures or have changes to their routine or rhythms.
Yeah.
And they like to work and...
yeah, kind of conservative in values, as long as like religious views and whatever, which also translates to not necessarily stepping out or being more like adventurous, which maybe is what brought us all together in some ways.
Yeah, that's at least a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, started out at Bethel, you know, wanting to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and father and, you know, just follow that, you know, I mean, maybe it's a little bit more than a career path, but ultimately, you know, that's what it was, you know, that family business career path.
Yeah.
And, you know, after, you know, my first semester, I realized that maybe wasn't for me, but...
What was your major going into college?
Christian ministries.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember I knew it changed as you went on.
Yeah. So, yeah, I switched to international studies, and then, yeah, somewhere along the way, you know, I met our mutual friend Tyler, and...
Yeah.
And yeah, we all had quite a few interesting adventures in college, you know, here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah. What was your switch? What was there? Is there anything you remember being like from Christian ministries coming in, maybe kind of following in the footsteps of your, you know, carrying on the whatever legacy of your family, but what was the switch for you from Christian ministries to?
I really didn't want to learn Hebrew. Hebrew class was kind of kicking my ass.
Dude, that class was terrible.
Yeah.
I took that too.
And I was kind of like, maybe I'll just do something different when I have to learn Hebrew.
Hebrew is one of those that makes you realize D's make degrees. I'm right there with you.
And then, did a trip to Guinea, West Africa, for a semester as an internship for part of my degree, and really had I guess you could call it a bit of a wake up or an epiphany there.
Is that your sophomore year or?
That would have been my junior year, where it didn't seem right to me to be going to the other side of the world to tell somebody that the way they were living was wrong.
Yeah.
And then also seeing a lot of imbalances and discrepancies, between worlds, and being there as someone from a country perhaps with more economic resources, and realizing that, really wasn't in a just position to make a fair analysis of the rightness or wrongness of somebody else's life.
Sure.
Because, that was a little bit of a change for me, because it was it kind of changed the whole trajectory of, the heroes I had worshipped ever since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And my reality structure began to change, and both what I saw for myself and how my future would be in this world began to change, because the whole
and everything you kind of knew prior to as well
for existing, I guess I really just began to see people as people, rather than somebody that you need to convert to get more people on your team.
Yeah.
I was kind of wait, what? There are no teams. Where did it come from? This need to distinguish which human beings are on your team and which ones aren't, and why.
And does it really matter?
Yeah, and why am I concerned with somebody else's eternal salvation? What does that word even mean?
Yeah.
There's just beginning to really
question
a lot of the dogma I was raised up in, and I think maybe dogma and rhetoric have their use and their place in instructing us and in guiding groups of people, but I think it's important to maybe look a little bit past just the words that make up a belief system and look at what's the point,
right?
And so and anyway, after that I came back from Guinea and continued at Bethel, and I think we all began to be asking similar questions around that time about how we treat the people around us, whether regardless of where they fit into our belief system. And we were all in an environment that was kind of a closed environment of religious belief, and I think everybody was kind of looking for
finding their way, kind of figuring out
how do we practice this rather than just talk about it.
Yeah, and especially our friends group and the guys that we've that we're hanging out with this weekend, and that was definitely a catalyst for those conversations and an open group and an open discussion that we were able to have, and like-minded, like you mentioned in the beginning. So it fostered great communication and fostered good conversation that allowed us to kind of process through some of those different things. I mean, we were just talking earlier, and I brought up how Derek was influential, and one question that he asked me is, why do you believe that on it? And that was the catalyst for a lot of the breakdown of some of the things that I had really believed and had as what I thought was a foundation, but what I realized was it was foundational, but it was what I'd known, what I was taught, what my parents believed, and it wasn't necessarily mine, And I think that speaks to kind of what you were saying a little bit about that breakdown of us all kind of trying to find our own way and figure out exactly what we believe and how we want to live our lives, and what that means to us, and kind of going on from there. that was probably like similar time when the Calvert House idea kind of came about, right?
Yeah, around that time, and then I think the following school year I got together to live in a collective space to pursue, and I think that kind of happened in a way different than we'd planned because the administration wanted to kind of maybe monitor a little bit the activities of its students and maybe have a little bit of a hand in guiding that process. So I think that was also an experience of learning how systems can be beneficial for people and institutions. At the same time, different dreams and passions stay alive better outside of a cage.
Yeah, definitely. So the Calvert House, just to kind of summarize that, it was an idea that you guys, I don't know how much I was really involved in that communication, but it stemmed from like coming together, bringing like-minded people together, living intentionally in a community, in a house, and practicing the things that you believed, that included the faith beliefs and included just how we all kind of perceived treating people and humanity and individuals and loving our neighbors and community and
and I think basic things like shoveling the sidewalk for your elderly neighbor. It's not superhero stuff. No. It's basic human stuff that I think really transcends any particular belief system. At the same time, does get overlooked in the rush of day-to-day life. Yeah.
It's easy to overlook the simple things that you can do to make a big impact on people's lives.
And to create the reality that like you would want to live in. It's like anybody can go outside and complain about how terrible the world is or how many shootings there are or how you can't trust your neighbors, or you can go out and act in a way that fosters relationships. And it doesn't have to be anything deep. It can just be like, you shovel your neighbor's sidewalk when you see that they're moving slow.
Yeah.
And you say hi.
Right. Simply saying hi.
And, some of those things open up into relationships that can last a lifetime, and others last 15 minutes, and you don't ever really know what's going to be what. But
right. And it doesn't matter necessarily. It's just treat it the same and go into that with the same mindset of like, this is just what you do as a human being to kind of treat people. And honestly, like everything, this Crazy Face Uno and this podcast, like these moments and these times that we've all spent together in that house and whatever are a catalyst for some of this. It's like shaped who I was at those times of how I've looked through different lenses. And you guys all like challenged me big time in those ways. Like, I don't know that was always, I always wanted to help people, but I don't know if I ever knew exactly what that looked like. And you guys kind of put in an image to that sometimes of, coming back and be like, hey, I met this really cool homeless guy. Like we sat and talked about life for an hour. And, like this was my experience. We're going to meet up at such and such next week. Like, oh, cool. Or, simply like, I just raked the yard or I just shoveled the snow and, like, let's make sure we do that the rest of the winter. Or, like, let's keep up with that, like, intentionality with our neighbors.
Yeah, and even, stuff like, within that of taking time to eat dinner together with each other as friends, as, we as, animals are healthier when we're sharing.
Yeah.
It is possible to live in an isolated bubble and to, like, you can entertain yourself with your computer and your phone. Like, you don't need to talk to anybody. You can live and stay alive. But it's like, what nourishes us is learning how to share and sit down and spend time, and sometimes working through uncomfortable stuff and sometimes just being content to
just be who you are and sit and do nothing.
Drink some coffee together.
Do you have any like specific memories? Well, let me say this too, and you're the first one I'm kind of talking to, so you get some. I guess people get a little bonus, whatever. But one of the reasons that we've all actually been intentional about this weekend is because of Matt, who, unfortunately took his own life a couple of years ago, and it really kind of shook our small knit group of people. I think of how much we actually care about each other and how much we really the value of the relationships that we've had and the importance in those placeholders that each of us have like held in our hearts and in our lives. And I think that's been kind of cool to see us like actually be intentional about like, let's get together, let's do this. Like, I really do appreciate all of you guys. And, some of it's like you've traveled the world and communicating is difficult sometimes throughout those different ways. And life just happens, like we've all had life happen. It's easy to lose
track. Yeah. At the same time. Life is kind of its own refinery.
Yeah.
The connections that were going to last.
Yeah. Some do and some don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the true ones, I think, do.
Yeah.
And we've brought that in. And I just think that's a cool aspect of like us getting together and kind of being here. And I just want to mention Matt, I guess, and kind of like pay a little respect to him.
Yeah. And after graduation, Tyler and I went to Uganda through,
right.
Matt's dad, opened a connection for us to go there and teach for a few months after school. And, that was a pretty formative part of life. And like, and in that process of living in that house together, I think, he was definitely a catalyst. He was a shit stirrer in all the best ways. Like if he saw something that he felt wasn't right, or or somebody could just use some inspiration, he would go to great lengths to either make the situation right or to just
bring it to our attention.
Yeah, bring it to our attention, or show somebody that they were cared about.
Yeah. He definitely challenged the status quo and like just challenged even some of the like comforts and in some ways that we kind of like that everybody falls into, and like, hey, whether that's like in the house with the intention of the house, and bringing up some of those things, like, or just leading by example. He would he'd just go out and do his own thing. And, but I don't know. I know that you guys, like so my relationship with this house and with you guys is that I'm friends with all of you guys, and I would just come over and I would sleep on your couch about 3 to 4 nights out of the week. And I had my dorm room that I'd also, stay at or whatever, but I spent a lot of time with you guys, and, I felt like a part, but also not at the same time, but it was a fluid relationship there. But I know that you guys had a lot of things that would go on when I wasn't there too, like we just lived our own lives. Do you have any stories or like things that were like you like remember most about that year or that time period that you lived in the house?
I mean, in some ways it's a blur, and in other ways there are.
What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I was thinking of one day we had a snow day from school, and our neighbor Charlie had locked herself out of her house, and so we had we had to figure out how to break into her house and invite her in, and she was like in her pajamas, and we were all in our pajamas, and had this coffee breakfast party while we broke into her house. It was like 15 degrees below zero.
Yeah, a bonding moment.
And there was just a lot of stuff like that. And I don't know, speaking about with Matt specifically, I don't know, just lots of moments finding a hill or a parking garage to longboard. You guys did that a lot. I forgot about that. And it was kind of it was twofold in some ways, right? Like, we wanted to be a part. We wanted to like reach out to, I mean, like I would say that as a whole, the group was very intentional about
engaging with the homeless population in South Bend.
Yeah.
And sometimes that just meant like putting yourself in a situation where you might run into somebody or have a conversation or like to meet someone.
Yeah.
And I think some of that was sometimes that, and it's like a mixture of like, we're having fun. This is part of our life.
Yeah.
But also like we're in this area that we have the opportunity to meet new people and see what kind of a thing, like an impact we could have or a conversation we could have and learn about our community.
Yeah, it's and yeah, since then it's also been interesting to see kind of how that has continued after, people have gone away from here, but it's like I feel like there are formative times in our lives where ideas get planted in our heads, and it's easy to think about your formative education is almost a brainwashing, right? Like you get told to walk like this, to tie your shoes like this, and
the social norms
and behave like this. At the same time, I think it can be a useful mechanism for for planting and growing ideas, because I think that's really what changes and creates the reality that we live in, are the ideas that we're cultivating in our minds and in our hearts. And I think looking back at that time, everybody, like we were sitting down and talking the other day, it's like out of the 6 or 7 of us, 4 of us have been divorced. All of us but 2 of us have had children. And it's a lot of life has happened, and at the same time we're able to relate and speak the
find our
same
commonalities
language. And I think that's because in that time, like, we planted seeds of belief and practice into into the way we view the world, and I think it just has to do with treating people with kindness. I don't think it has to do with, again, like we were, because like he was so passionate about being a voice of kindness.
Yeah. And treating people as human beings. And he really was. And he challenged you. He challenged you if you weren't there, Yeah. Kind of like you said, he wasn't afraid to like speak up and be a little pot shit stirrer, but in a good way.
But he was also willing to, go on a trip to negotiate with the LRA for the return of child soldiers.
Right.
It wasn't just talk. It's like,
he put his...
Here's someone who like went and did.
Yeah. A lot of respect there for sure with like those, with his actions, and I think he challenged himself with those types of things too, like knowing that very thought.
Like he knew like there are people who are in a dangerous and violent situation, and I might have the possibility of helping them, and as long as there was a possibility of helping, he couldn't rest. And I don't, you never really know what's going through someone's mind as they leave this bodily form, but it's like I could imagine that being a lot to be thinking about all the time.
Yeah. And a little overwhelming maybe at times. And maybe feeling responsible for something that like isn't your responsibility. Sure.
But maybe you can help. So I don't know. It's
hard to know.
It's hard to know. Yeah. What's important to focus on in life?
Yeah.
Do you focus on like how much pain and suffering there is in the world and like ending it in some way? But it's like there will always be pain and suffering. Right. And so how do you relate to that without becoming numb to it?
Which is, we've talked about it even this weekend just as a group, but I feel like there's been an element of that, at least for me, of figuring out like, man, what's changed? Why am I not? For me, it's been like one of the catalysts was like, why do I not care like I did in college? why do I not have the same feelings? Why do I not have the same motivations? It's not that it's not there, and it's not that I don't care. It's just that something's changed, and I don't know why, right? And been exploring that cycle. I have a feeling it may be a little bit different for you in some ways, just with the like life that you've kind of lived since leaving college. But there's been a lot of life events too that I'm assuming you can probably relate in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you take those beliefs and then you live with them, and again, it's kind of that refining process, like the things that are true that you believe in. Like you might get run through the ringer in life. You might fail at a bunch of things, but like if there are true parts to what you believe in, like those things will withstand the test of time.
True.
And if there are delusions or illusions, those things will get crushed by life eventually. And maybe that's an illusion as well, that anything can withstand the test of time. Like, eventually, things will change form. At the same time, I think in this, mystery that is life and the way we navigate through it, I think there are universal ways of finding kindness everywhere, all over the world. It can be in the city or in the country. You can be completely isolated by yourself or in a large group of people. And I think there is a very real sentience to life that like wants us to feel welcome here.
Yeah, I'd agree. And maybe that's a good segue. Like you graduated college, you and Tyler.
Yeah.
And then you went to Uganda. I know that you guys, that was a challenging time for both of you in different ways.
Yeah.
But it seems like that was maybe also like a catalyst for the next several years of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I mean, and I think also for him and I, for our friendship as well, it's always been, it was 3 months. It was an intense time. At the same time, looking at life now, 3 months is a short time. Yeah. At the same time, for us, it's something like we still, we still remember stories from, that time there, things we learned. And also I think, continuing kind of on that process of like, okay, I'm here to teach at this school, but really like I'm in a place where like I feel like these kids have so much to teach me, and I don't really know what to say to them about why I'm here. So I think, keeping humble is probably an important attribute to practice or work at. And life will work that process on us, if we aren't. So at the same time, for going into situations all over the world, different social situations, different cross-cultural situations, it's important to remember that like there's a lot I don't know here. Yeah. And just
because it's different doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, and
doesn't mean it's right, but
if you
like,
go in
to explore
with,
that.
A learning mentality as opposed to like, I know how to handle this mentality.
And that goes back to like the white savior complex and some of those types of things.
Yeah, and I feel like most people are willing to share, like if you are willing to learn. Yep. And culture really is fascinating in it, and it is so different all over the world, and at the same time there are universal aspects to it. Yep.
I think that, and those are the, I've done a little bit of traveling, definitely not as much as you have, but there's more things we all have in common than there are differences. Yeah. You know, and the differences are like subtle, though they can have a big impact or like be very different. They're still subtle sometimes. And you know other language, so you speak Spanish. Yeah. So like that's another element that like I don't, or like going into another country, like you're able to communicate in a different way as well, and like there's respect that kind of goes along with some of those different things, and allows you to have a different type of relationship with some of the people that you might meet in within your travel.
Yeah, it's and I think that as well is like there's a balance there. You know, you let go of a little bit of your own identity as an American,
and also grab a hold of a little bit.
And you get to
like
explore. Yeah, it's like, well, what is it like to put on the costume of this culture?
Yeah.
And I think at first it might feel like that, and then also after a while of speaking another language, you also realize it's changing you internally. You know, the manner of expressing emotions in this culture and in this language is a different one. That, like, it felt like I was just trying on this, different way of speaking, but then it's actually like, I mean, if you think about it, you're rewiring your brain, the way your brain releases dopamine, and so it's like, which I personally feel is like the guiding force of the evolution of the human mind is that like we seek pleasure. There's a reward for growing in this new way, and so the human mind expands into all these different directions because
it fosters a good relationship with those, and like because it wants to do that,
it fires off pleasure receptors and says do more. So after a while you do actually you change, and that's what is identity, what is self. That's a broad question that has been answered a million ways and has never been answered, but I think that is kind of why, is because it's changing depending on
it's innate within us. It's not something it's like built into our human evolution of life or whatever.
So I don't know. There's a lot to see in the world.
Where did you go right after Uganda?
After Uganda, I went to New Zealand to visit my brother.
Yep.
He and his wife had a new baby, so I went to visit my nephew there. And
how many siblings do you have?
I've got my older brother and 2 younger sisters.
Oh yeah, gosh, I forget that sometimes. You're one of 4.
Yeah.
Cool. So you went there, and then you went to Australia?
Australia, and then Hawaii. And it was kind of nice to just go through these places, and I think there is a lot about traveling that really feels like a journey into the fabric of reality. You feel guided by unseen forces. You follow the kindness of strangers, and
well, and Sam and Tony have talked about that, which hopefully we can get into that a little bit with them, but with their bike trip that they took, from Indiana, and just some of those, not necessarily having a plan or knowing where they're going to stay in every evening, but felt that there was a guiding force in some ways, or whatever that, there's different names for that. I think people call that different things, but that like when a storm rolled in, how people seemed to show up, and become available and like help them, and whether that's just cool, we made it, or is that something more that's kind of pushing that along? Or is that just something we do to like rationalize in our head? Or
it is kind of, and it's kind of a mystery, and it's kind of this constantly changing thing. I mean, I've experienced that a lot hitchhiking, where just
do you have a moment in particular that you think of that like, if not, it's no big deal. But
I mean, it's kind of hard to describe, but after I noticed it after repeatedly hitchhiking on one stretch of highway out in California. You kind of get a feel for, your ride was coming before it came. And really feeling connected to the forces of nature, and realizing like, I can like pray for a ride, or I can ask this bird to get me a ride. But either way, like, there were very real connections where maybe a thought would occur in your head, and you just know, like, I better get my bag together, there's going to be a car coming in 5 minutes. And I feel like it's very possible to have a lot of different relationships with reality. at the same time, I think that if we're open to it providing for us, then it will. I think we just need to be open to how it will appear.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Interesting. I've never really thought about that in that way, I guess, of like kind of perception, which I know you brought this up actually, but like, yeah, like how you, like if you need something, like for the example, like you need a ride or you're hitchhiking, and kind of almost breathing that into existence in a sense of like, it may not look the way you want it to, or but maybe that's what you need, or maybe that's what's like.
Yeah, and then also, you're entering into like this box that's flying down the road. You're entering into somebody else's reality, so you're going to be shaped by this experience. You're going to be shaped by the questions they ask. You're going to be shaped by their curiosity about what you're doing, and something I
really believe is life's meant to be shared. And whether you do it intentionally or not, you share. And it speaks to that, like when you get in this vehicle or you get in this box, like you said, with another person, their questions, your questions, the look, just a look can change the way you perceive things. Just the tone of someone's voice can change the way that we see things, or perceive things through a lens, which is interesting. So there's so many of these different factors, but regardless, if you're just walking down the street in South Bend and you pass by somebody, whether you look at them or not, you shared a piece of you with them. You shared. They're gonna internalize that differently. Maybe it has an impact on them that they're cognizant of, and maybe it doesn't. But like a smile, if you're walking down the street and you smile at somebody and they smile back at you or say hi, like you affected change, right? Like you shaped them, kind of like what you're speaking to of getting in a car. And I think that that's really true. I mean, the way you handle situations, to the way you look at somebody, to the way you don't look at somebody, you still share a part of yourself with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think there are a lot of questions about the meaning of life and
purpose. I think it's just the pursuit. I think that's half the battle. I think that's part of the purpose of life, is pursuing purpose in some ways,
Yeah.
How do you ever, like, you can ask, how do you ever know if you reached your purpose or you found your purpose? I don't know if you ever really know. And can you? Is that important? And that's why I say it's that journey of like, you're always pursuing it.
Yeah.
And even if you reached it, isn't there more to it than that? So like, then it goes beyond that.
Yeah. How do we grow in a way that also allows us to enjoy the process of growing? I think it's important, like, to be aware and maintain connectedness to the realities of others, at the same time realizing that we're constantly creating our experience. We're constantly creating a communal experience. We're, sometimes it's a shared process, and sometimes it's a very internal process that will react and interact, in differing ways with the ideas of others. And it is kind of a question of free will sometimes, maybe, of like, how much are we actually choosing our own lives, our own existences, and how much are we following a pre-charted course that we occasionally have opportunities to deviate from.
I definitely struggle with that. I remember my senior year in college was one of the times I really started to question that, of like free will and choice. And as I struggled through my like religious questions anyway, of like questioning my faith and questioning some of those different things, of, is it free will if it is predestined? Like, is it free will? I don't know. Like, I question that. I feel like it isn't. I have a trouble. But then at the same time, like, just because you know the outcome doesn't mean that you're not choosing that that at the same time, or that's not. I don't know. It's complicated, but.
And how many universes have we already had this conversation?
That's a deep one. that's a lot of holes we could go down with that one.
And will it be different this time?
Yeah,
because it's this time.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Maybe. Oof, man, that one messed with my brain a little bit there. So you went to New Zealand, you went to Australia, you went to Hawaii, came back for a little bit.
Came back, lived in the shed at Tyler's mom's house. Yeah. Yep. And then went back to New Zealand to pursue a love affair with the future mother of my son.
Salvador.
Yeah, Salvador. Well, the love affair was with his mother.
Yes.
Amaranta. But
your son.
Yes. We made a beautiful little boy named Salvador.
Yeah.
Who's 8 years old now. But so we moved. We lived in New Zealand during her pregnancy, and then went to Argentina.
That's right.
And he was born there.
And is that where you started the bed and breakfast?
No, we actually moved to Brazil.
Okay.
A few months after he'd been born.
Were you doing like gardening and like selling fruit or?
We were in New Zealand. We were selling fruit out of vans on the side of the road.
An element of that at some point in time.
Yeah, and then we had a bed and breakfast on the beach, a little vegetarian restaurant for a few years, and it was really challenging to have a new child in a relationship in a new culture.
Yeah.
And it was also really rewarding, really rich. We began to experience marital complications, and
sure.
Life happened. And so over the course of a year, after having been there, close to 3 years, we parted ways, and she went back to Argentina, and I came up to California.
Yep.
In the States, and lived out in the forest, in the mountains for a few years, and I've been able to visit with Salvador some, and
that's cool.
Throughout all those travels, lots happened, and I've learned a lot about forgiveness and about love and compromise and kindness and anger, and
you've definitely had to deal with all of those and a lot of those for sure. Which now kind of brings you back in some way. I mean, that's a fast track of that time period, which is several years. But brings you to here. You sit back in South Bend. Yeah. You bought a property.
Yeah, I bought an abandoned building that's been abandoned for about 12 years.
They wanted to tear it down, and you've been working on it to keep it alive and to kind of build a dream that you have and something you have in your head.
Yeah. I'd like to basically turn it into a greenhouse, keeping it off grid. Just because that's something I've enjoyed. I guess you'd kind of call it a hobby of figuring out, ways to live. I don't know that it's necessarily even a more simple way. At the same time, just a more, maybe a quieter and a slower way.
It's a good way to put it. I like that.
And realizing that there are, there's opportunity everywhere to create beauty, and I feel that sometimes the easiest place to do it is where there's chaos. Yeah, like it's easy to restore order. Like you can just clear a small space, and in the midst of chaos, a small bit of order. Yeah.
Big ripple.
It has exactly.
Yeah. We fast tracked your life for sure, and we talked about some different things. But like, one thing I do, and I mentioned to you, I do like to ask. Generally, I asked at the beginning, is like, what are 3 things we should know about you? But I think it's kind of cool to think about some of the things we talked about, or now that people have heard a little bit about your life. You are a I don't think this is insulting. You're a mysterious man, right? Like you live it's a non-traditional lifestyle. And, you know, Tony keeps saying like, you're an outlier. You are an outlier. You don't fit in a box necessarily. And you like challenge the status quo. And I think it's in a good way because I think it's always challenged us as a community and as a group of friends in a good way to like think outside of the box and think differently. But I think it's just interesting. I would love to hear like maybe just three things that you, or it could be more of like, what are the things that are important to you that you wish people knew about you? Or yeah, what are three things you wish people knew about you or should know about you? It's tough.
It's kind of a tough one. Yeah. I'm just going to go with the first thing that popped into my head is I really like to climb trees.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love climbing trees. And I think trees love being climbed. You know?
Sounds like it's something that Joel would say. Joel Hartzell would be like, I think they like being climbed. Yeah. I can hear him saying that.
Well, you know, lots of trees get squirrels and birds in them, but very few trees get to have a real live human being climb in them. So I think it's an interactive. Well, it's an interactive process. Like there's a subtle energy to trees, but it's like you can't argue that they're not alive. So where does sentience begin and end? Is it just with like, you know, and like you talk to your dog, you know, sometimes in English and sometimes just with like a look of the eyes. So it's like, why is it so crazy to think about like there being an interaction with like this tree as I'm climbing it? Like it will like actually show you like how to climb it. Like in some trees it's like almost like an escalator sometimes because like you get an invitation to keep on climbing. Yeah. In other trees, you know, there's more like you're not getting in here.
Yeah, which is, and each tree is different.
Yeah.
Just like each of us are different. And it also holds the weight. It's strong. You know, it holds us. And interesting. Yeah. Cool. So there's one. You got two more?
Yeah. Let's see. I believe in everything and nothing all at the same time.
Can you unpack that just a little bit for us? Like that?
Yeah, I think that life is as limited as we decide to make it in our minds.
Sure.
I think that reality can unfold in a number of ways, largely based upon perception and what you are open to perceiving.
Yeah. Which begs the question of what is reality in some ways, right?
Yeah. And I think it's something that's incomprehensible at the same time. There's something about it that is willing to like hold you in the palm of its hand and be like, be amazed.
Yeah.
And don't think you're hot shit because you're in the palm of my hand.
Yeah. I
don't know. For me personally, I don't necessarily resonate with the God word because there's a lot of like narrative storyline that goes along with that, and like and even like gender based reality structures that go along with that. I think it's more just you look into the eyes of a stranger and you realize like, what have you seen?
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know, and I think maybe that has been like a large part of our interactions with homeless people. I think began to realize that like
there's another world.
There's a whole other way of perceiving reality that is no more or less legitimate than And sometimes people are on the streets because their way of perceiving reality is not accepted within what we call our current culture or the mainstream. And there are a number of reasons why somebody would be in that position at the same time.
I remember, so I went on a camping trip last year before I got married. I was telling you about. The intention was to write my vows. I didn't end up writing my vows on that trip, but it allowed me to think and perceive and think a lot of things. And I remember writing in my journal when you look at a square, just a foot by a foot by a foot square in the middle of the forest, it would take me a lifetime to discover the magnitude of that foot by foot square, right? Mm-hmm. Of like the world that encompasses. Because if you zoom in, there's microbes that do different things, and to comprehend just that square, is like blows my mind, right? And just to go deep into that world, and that's just that spot. You could do that anywhere in the world and put a pin right in any spot in the world, and that spot right there is going to be completely different than the spot next to it and have a different world and microbiome, and it's crazy. And that's the minute, the macro, that comes in, but there's also so much more to that as well.
Yeah. So and what are we in this spec,
It's a very small part of that, but yet that's our world that we...
and we get the privilege of interacting with, all of these other sentient creatures. And so, I don't know. I mean, ascribing to one belief and one practice is, I mean, at the same time, we use the language of people that have, attempted to describe these things before us, because that's what we've got. That's, we will keep exploring and explaining, because that's the kind of creatures we are.
Yep. We want to explain, we want to understand, and so we try to put it into words the best we can, but it's so hard to. It's like looking at the Grand Canyon. You've been to the Grand Canyon, right?
No, I've never been to the Grand Canyon.
No? Okay, well, all right. Name what's the tallest... Have you been to like a mountain that you like looked at and like took a picture of? And then for me, it's the Grand Canyon, right?
Yeah.
You go to the Grand Canyon, you see a picture of the Grand Canyon, it's like, yeah, it looks beautiful, it's huge, great, cool. Then you go to the Grand Canyon, you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't put that into words. Like this picture doesn't actually do this entire thing justice. Like it doesn't.
Yeah,
I can't really. And I think that's sometimes the same thing when we try to put words to certain things that are just unfathomable sometimes.
Yeah.
But so one more thing. What is there any?
One
we've done
more
two.
thing.
What's one more thing we should know about you, or you want to tell us about you?
Let's see.
Tough one.
Third one. It's got to be the best one.
Best for the last.
You got me. I mean, I thought I might have said everything there already is.
There it is. There we go.
I really like ham sandwiches.
There we go. What about them? Do you have mustard or mayonnaise on them, or just straight up ham sandwich?
Yeah, I mean, mustard, mayo.
Cheese?
Yeah, some cheese, some cheddar.
White or wheat? Or
wheat.
Indifferent?
And, I would also add that somehow sandwiches are always better when somebody else makes them. And I can make a pretty good sandwich.
Right.
But you know what? Every sandwich that somebody else has made for me is always better than any sandwich I've ever made for myself. And I wonder if that's the same with sandwiches that I make for other people.
Yeah. I want to make you a sandwich now.
That was part of my trick. Anyway, I gotta...
Calvin, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Love you, buddy.
Love you too, man. I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me. Everybody, peace!